Have you ever heard that 80% of the results you get from the gym are diet and 20% come from your workouts? To be honest, that is complete and utter BS. And on today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast, we are going to tell you why. We're going to cue the intro song, and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Charlie. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to let you know that we recently released a book called The Exercise for Life Method. And if you enjoy the conversations that we have every single week on this podcast, then you are going to love this book. So to pick up a free copy of this book, all you have to do is go to exerciseforlifemethod.com. Now, without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, here in Schaumburg, Illinois. Now, at Muscle Activation Schaumburg, we believe your health is your most valuable asset, and the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. And if you are looking for a way to learn how to exercise to build the health and function of your muscles, you are going to love what we are starting up again on Sunday, August 29th. That's right, the One Workout Away Challenge is coming back for season 2. And we are so excited to be kicking off season 2 of the One Workout Away Challenge on Sunday, August 29th. All you need to do to get 28 days of guidance on how to work out and how to use exercise to build the health and function of your body from both myself and Julie is go to owa.matschaumburg.com. Now, on today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast, we are diving into a phrase that is, in our opinion, way too often thrown out in the fitness and health worlds. And it's too often thrown out because it's complete BS. And so we need to talk about this phrase. We need to talk about why it's BS, and we need to talk about what things you need to be considering when you hear a phrase like this and how you should actually be approaching the information that's being provided in a phrase like this.
So Charlie, when I first moved here to Illinois, I started working at a big box gym, a commercial gym. And the first thing we did during the first week was we did training, but we also had to do like all the classes, all the group classes, and practice all the steps that we would be delivering to potential clients when we first got there. So one of the things we had to do was the consultation. So another trainer that had been around for a long time worked with me, and he did a practice consultation on me to give me an example. And I remember after we reviewed my goals and why I was working out, then he sat me down and said, there's the 80-20 rule. Have you ever heard of the 80-20 rule? And actually at that time I hadn't. And then we talked about how 80% of your results come from your nutrition and your diet, and 20% come from exercise. And so we had to disperse our efforts in that way. And that was the first time I had ever heard of it. But ever since I heard it that one time, then I've heard it so many more times, and other phrases that seem to really go right hand in hand with that phrase. For example, have you ever heard abs are made in the kitchen? Meaning, your abs come from how you eat or not eat. I love that we're going to talk about this today because it is, in our perspective, completely false, this idea. But later, I do want to kind of share where I do kind of like this phrase, but it comes with a backstory. So we'll get there.
Well, here's the thing. Let's jump right to where this phrase is applicable, because I think, like you're saying, it's so often thrown out, this idea that, 80% of your results come from your nutrition, 20% of your results come from exercise. And the whole context that I'm familiar with that being thrown out in is in regards to weight loss.
Yes, that's where I was going to say too.
Yeah, and so there's a couple issues with that. Is one, exercise as it pertains to weight loss, yeah, that's only part of the story. But the bigger issue is that there are a lot of reasons to exercise that have nothing to do with weight loss.
Exactly.
And that's really, I think, our biggest gripe with the whole notion that, it's 80% nutrition and 20% exercise, is because it's not. It's not at all. if it's a weight loss thing, okay, cool. But like I discussed in the Exercise for Life Method book, weight loss is not the goal of exercise. Weight loss can be a result of exercise, of improving the health of your body, but you're not exercising to lose weight. And that's a whole other tangent in and of itself. But the point is that when you hear something like that, like, oh, it's 80% nutrition, 20% exercise when it comes to, and then they put out a blanket statement, your results in the gym. It's like, well, what results are you talking about? If you're talking about losing weight, okay, maybe. If you're talking about every other single thing or why somebody should be exercising, then no, it's not.
Charlie, I love that you brought that up because it is the place where people will place this phrase. 80-20 rule applies to the results you see in the gym as it pertains to weight loss. And I was actually thinking the same thing. You brought up in your book the Exercise for Life method. There are two main goals that people think about when exercising. One, weight loss, or two, performance. And most people fall into the category of weight loss because most people aren't training for a sport or an event or blah, 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 all those things. So what I like about the statement is that it helps people hopefully not abuse exercise to try to lose weight. Meaning when you think about 80-20, 80 seems a lot bigger than the 20, right? So hopefully people can see like, hey, if I'm trying to lose weight, I can't rely only on exercise. Exercise is part of the puzzle. I wouldn't say that 80% goes to nutrition. I would say there's a lot of other components that would go into weight loss. Again, this is not our expertise, but 20% seems so much smaller than 80% that hopefully it highlights to weight loss people that do not abuse exercise to get to your weight loss goals. Because what happens is people will exercise and exercise and exercise and exercise because I think exercise can sometimes be the easier way out rather than have to look at your nutrition and actually manage your stress and actually get good night's sleep and actually manage all the other factors that influence weight loss. I think exercise can be an easy one, a fun one that's entertaining, one that you can be distracted during and all these things, but then it leaves your body in a really poor state. But the way that the 80-20 rule is brought up in today's world and in today's exercise culture, no one is saying 80-20 for the results you want to see in the gym for weight loss. And actually, if it's the results you see in the gym, we need to actually cross out you see in the gym. It's the results that you see for weight loss. So anyways, that is where the statement belongs. You kind of need that little extra line that goes after the 80-20 rule. But the part that we need to really discuss, which is where Charlie and I have a huge problem with, is that the way we're currently presented 80-20 rule is it's showing that exercise has little potency in the results that you see in the gym. But here's the thing, the results you get when you exercise cannot be matched by any other thing, meaning that 100% of the results you get from the gym are from your exercise. Period. That's it. Nutrition cannot make up for that. Stress management cannot make up for that. Getting good sleep cannot make up for that. Just like you can't exercise and think you can have terrible sleep and you're living as optimally as possible. Each area that promotes your health does an excellent job at its own role.
Yeah, like you're saying, Julie, exercise is 100% responsible for the results that exercise gets. Nutrition is 100% responsible for the results that nutrition gets. Sleep is 100% responsible for the results that sleep gets. And when we start saying, oh, well, the results that you get from your exercise are dependent upon your nutrition, it's like that's a really tough statement to make because it's not. It's not, because there are so many things that exercise can provide that nutrition can't provide. And it's not to undermine the value of nutrition, but everybody seems to be undermining the value of exercise. And that's where we really draw an issue. I remember in grad school, I was taking a nutrition class from a man who had a PhD in nutrition. And he stood up at the front and he said, nutrition can do a lot to help improve your health. Exercise can do everything that nutrition does, and it can do more. And that's from a guy with a PhD in nutrition. It's not somebody who took, like a 3-weekend course online and all of a sudden they're a nutrition guru. That's somebody with a PhD in nutrition. And he's saying exercise can do everything that nutrition can do, and it can do more. And that's a part of the story that's not being told. It's not that nutrition's not important. It's that exercise is being undervalued and the importance of exercise is not being seen. And I think that, I don't want to keep bringing it back to my book, but I think that was a large driver for me to write the Exercise for Life method, is to try to get people to see just how important exercise is. And it's phrases like this that kind of really draw out just how ignorant, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but just how uneducated people are about how important exercise is and how powerful exercise is at improving your health.
One thing I think that continues to keep this cyclical thing of undermining the value of exercise is the fact that whenever we have things like blood values that come back weird, or your doctor's ooh, you need to get a little healthier, something is out of whack or whatever, the first thing we always think of is, oh, I need to fix up my diet. And then we'll come back and check in on things. Or, oh, your cholesterol's high, why don't you cut out some meat, and then, we'll check that in 6 months. Why isn't anyone saying, hey, why don't you change your exercise? And I want you to exercise every day, and then we'll check in on your blood values. And no one does that. Mm-hmm. And that's why we never get the proof that we need on the regular basis, even though science tells us that it does happen. And Charlie, I think that you even had a really cool experience just this past month or whatever when you got your blood work done. As you guys know, Charlie has type 1 diabetes, and you'll have to jump in and fill in the details. Mm-hmm. But every time we get different numbers back, because you get your blood drawn probably every 6 months.
3 to 6 months.
3 to 6 months. Mm-hmm. We were blown away by your numbers. Mm-hmm. And I said, thinking back over the last 3 to 6 months, I think the biggest thing that you changed was adding in more exercise. Mm-hmm. I think that was the biggest thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my A1C has always been relatively decently controlled. And, when I got it drawn in March, when the numbers were taken in March, it was 6.4, which for a type 1 diabetic is pretty decent. And then, like you were saying, Julie, I really didn't change anything with my diet, but I changed some things with the volume of some of my exercise. And I got my numbers drawn in June, the end of June, beginning of July. And I got those numbers back, and my A1C had dropped down to 6.1, which for a type 1 diabetic is incredibly good. And especially, it would be one thing if it was 6.1 and I was eating, fewer than, say, 40 grams of carbs each day. I was on a pretty darn, low carb diet, but I'm not. And I'm not saying that that's a good or bad thing, but I'm just saying that I'm just mindful about when I eat my carbohydrates. So I didn't really change anything from a nutrition perspective. What I changed was stuff with my exercise, and that had a dramatic change in my blood values. And so often, you get somebody with, wacky A1Cs, and I mean, let's be honest, most time when people have really wacky A1Cs, their nutrition can use work. So it's not a bad recommendation to look at, hey, what are you doing with your nutrition? Let's clean that up. But what's often not looked at or not emphasized nearly as much is the exercise component. And so like you were saying, that was just kind of a really neat N1 sample of meaning N1, meaning it's only me. It's not, across 100,000 people or anything like that. But in this one sample, which really, for me, that's the only sample that matters, is what happens within my body. That was a dramatic decrease in my A1C scores, and from only shifting how I exercised.
I think this concept would be a really cool one to apply, that whenever people get their blood work and they get their fasted blood glucose, that's usually when people actually have their doctors say, ooh, you're getting a little high with your fasting glucose levels. They're creeping up. And always the first thing that we are told is to start changing your diet. Eat less carbs, eat less sugar, that whole story. But what would happen if we left that still and we actually changed how we exercised? I know when you're hearing it, you're probably thinking, well, isn't sugar the thing that would like go into my bloodstream and make my glucose go high? Yes, but also exercise and muscle is the thing that takes it out.
Yes.
So you have to kind of think of both sides of the spectrum. And if you haven't changed your diet, meaning you've always had the same carbohydrate load throughout your years, well, then it almost in my head seems like, well, then your body's not handling that as well. So maybe your body is becoming less able and less capable. So why don't we build up and train your body to be utilizing more and more of this glucose that's just chilling in your bloodstream?
Well, that's such a great point, Julie, because so often when we think of something like insulin resistance or fasting glucose levels or something like that, like you said, the focus is on nutrition. But to my knowledge, nutrition isn't going to shift insulin resistance. However, physical activity will. And physical inactivity will make things worse. And so, if you have a fire going, you don't want to be dumping gasoline on, but it would be worthwhile to also start doing something to actually put that fire out. What I mean by that analogy is if you are insulin resistant or developing insulin resistance or seeing your fasting blood glucose levels rising, yes, it would be smart not to continuously assault your body with carbohydrates if you're demonstrating an inability to effectively utilize that glucose and shuttle that glucose out of your bloodstream. However, limiting your carbohydrate intake is not necessarily going to improve your insulin resistance, to my knowledge. To my knowledge, the thing that's going to do that is changing how you exercise in your physical activity throughout your day. And that's the part that is too often left out of the story.
Absolutely. So when we're thinking about this 80-20 rule, 0% of nutrition would participate in building up your ability to shuttle glucose out of your bloodstream, which is a function that exercise can do. Exercise does a lot of other really cool things that nutrition cannot do, and, other things that are good for your health they cannot do. One of those is joint health and joint function. Exercise directly impacts your ability to continue to have healthy joints, good functioning joints, healthy muscles, good functioning muscles. Nutrition, sleep, and stress management do so much less for your muscle system and your joint system than exercise can do.
I mean, just think about like what your joints need to be healthy. They need motion of the joints and they need force going through them. Nutrition's not providing any of those. Now, again, it's not that nutrition has absolutely no role or isn't a value, but when you look at what your joints need to be healthy, that's an exercise-based thing. And again, if you are exercising to lose weight, that's a discussion in and of itself, which we kind of touched on at the beginning, is really there's so much more to weight loss than just trying to burn calories with your exercise. So again, like that's a completely separate discussion. But for every other result that you're trying to get in the gym, exercise is the thing. Exercise, when you do it appropriately for your body and when you do it how it needs to be done, that's going to be the thing that stimulates your body to change, and your nutrition can help to support that. But your nutrition isn't driving the change. I think that's, like, in my head, the big differentiator is like your nutrition is supporting the change, but your nutrition's not the thing that's necessarily driving the change.
So to wrap up for today, we want to leave you with this reminder that exercise is in itself 100% amazing at exactly what it should be designed to do, which is improve the health and function of your body. And when we can use it to do that, that's when you get the greatest health benefits. I hope after today's convo, you are thinking about all the times that maybe you undermine the potency of exercise and you realize, hey, I really do need to be exercising to get the health benefits of exercise. But again, you actually have to do the exercise. Shameless plug, we have 2 opportunities for you guys to learn more about using exercise to improve your health. One, which has just blown up. Charlie just released his book called The Exercise for Life Method. And actually, I'm not a huge reader myself. And if you're listening to podcasts, maybe that's you. maybe you just like listening because you're in the car or something. But he also released the audiobook, and it is a really cool, interesting dive into how exercise is potent at changing different aspects of your health. Again, as we brought up in the beginning, a lot of people exercise for two reasons: weight loss or performance. And there is so much more that exercise can do for you that we really rarely acknowledge. And the other thing is go to owa.matschaumburg.com and sign up for our next One Workout Away challenge. This is a private Facebook group where Charlie and I guide you through 4 weeks or 28 days of guided exercise, all geared towards improving the health and function of your body. And we know it's an online group, so it cannot be tailored to every single person. But what we try to do is to teach you and educate you on how to make the tweaks you need to make, what to look out for, and what you should be doing. So make sure you sign up for that before the start date, because the start date, it is a hard close for registration, and that will begin on Sunday, August 29th.
Awesome. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is really big into their nutrition, but really isn't that interested in exercising because they believe that their health results come from nutrition and maybe nutrition only? Share this episode with them so they can learn why they need to start taking their exercise more seriously and put more weight on the results that they can get from their exercise and not rely as heavily on nutrition for all of their health results. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It helps people find this content when they are looking for information on exercise and when they are looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week. So how'd you like that episode? Did you find the information useful? If you enjoyed what we discussed today, then you are going to love the Exercise for Life Method, which is a book that we just put out and you can get a free copy of by going to exerciseforlifemethod.com. All we ask is that you pay for shipping and handling, so head there now and get your free copy, as well as some exclusive bonuses that you will get instant access to when you get the book. You can learn more and get your copy at exerciseforlifemethod.com. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.